Hello, welcome back to the Cubase Fundamentals course. We're in the process of writing Project 1, and in the last episode I unleashed my hideous vocals on the world. We're going to finish off our examination of VariAudio today with all of the bits and pieces that we didn't deal with in the last episode. There's still lots of functionality to have a look at. In the meantime, if you want to check out the Patreon link below, you'll be able to download a copy of all of these project files and follow along with this project. Without further ado, let's get into it. So we'll open the full-size VariAudio viewer and we'll just have a look at the first 4 bars. So you can see as I zoom, it gets its locators wrong, and then click zoom locators and it fixes it again. First thing we want to have a look at today is just flattening out this tiny little bump in the vocals where I dip down a bit too low here. A couple of things to show you. The first one is that we have an internal auditioning tool. Now, can you see we've got the audition play button itself with a loop, and then there's also a little volume slider here. This thing is really weird. When you hover over it and click, it pops up a new slider. So what you can do with the Audition tool is select a range of the vocal that you're dealing with, and as soon as I click play now, it starts looping around that internal loop. So it's abandoned its original locators, and now this volume slider is controlling the level of just that internal data. So this is really useful when you don't want to mess with your main locators. I'm perfectly happy processing the 4 bars, but I really want to focus in on this note here. And what I want to do is flatten this bit. Now there are 2 ways that I could do it. In the previous episode, I would have solved it by cutting this segment up and just flattening that bit. Just undo that. The other way that I can do it is with these little triangles. Can you see set range for straighten pitch curve? What I'm going to do is bring the right hand one in, and now the flatten process, the flatten function, is only going to operate on that section there. Now you need to be careful, because any flatten operations that you've performed previously or subsequently will be subjected to that range. Each segment only has one of these things. So now if I pick up the straighten pitch curve tool, you can see that it's only flattening the region in the range. But if I now move this curtain again, you'll see that it flattens the rest of the segment. So if you only want to process part of the segment and you're happy to use these little curtains, that's great. But just bear in mind that it is dynamic. If I wanted to do any more flattening, say on that little dip there, I'd have to bounce this first. The next thing that I want to have a look at is in this little range up here where I'm cascading down on these upper notes. So I'm going to set myself a new range, control click on 8, control click on 10, zoom to locators, and that little artifact there, I'm really focusing. We'll use the Audition tool. It's kind of a weird click where that's not quite working properly. Well, there's all manner of ways that I could fix that. I can try to do it with flattening. Let's flatten that note. There you go. That's fine. I'll do it that way. I could undo that and try to approach it from the other side. Yep, that would have worked as well. I'm going to flatten this way. Just make sure that that's actually done what I wanted it to. Okay, that's a bit smoother now. Excellent. What I want to show you with moving these things backwards and forwards in time is that you do have kind of like a secondary audio warp feature. You can actually see warp markers at the top of the interface. If I pick one of these things up, you can see it says warp end, and now drag it to the left. You get new warp markers every time you do one of these things. It's creating new warp markers. Now you can interact with the warp markers from inside VariAudio. I never do because it absolutely caves my brain. what happens is, if I pick this up and drag to the left, watch what happens when I let go of this zone. Everything shifts to the right. There is logic about it. Every time I kind of grasp with my fingernails to understand what's going on, I slip off and fall down the cliff. So I basically never do audio warp processing from here because it's completely counterintuitive to me. If I wanted to move stuff around, I don't use this window at all. I would actually hop over to the audio warp screen, turn free warp on, and then all of the warp markers that I've just created are here, and I can pick them up and I can do whatever I want with them. So I do audio warp editing in the audio warp editor and pitch editing in the VariAudio editor, and never the twain shall meet. Need to undo all of that stuff. So that was one undo too far because I've just brought my little kink back. So if you have a look, I don't think we've actually done a redo as part of this thing, but it's basically Control-Shift-Z. But more often than not, I actually just use the edit menu because I can never remember the shortcut command. It's too many things for me to press all in one go. What else have we got? I did make some notes of some of the stuff that I wanted to fix, and my notes are telling me that I need to trim a couple of dB off a note in the middle of bar 6. Let's have a listen to that. So I'm telling myself that this note is a little bit too loud. Okay, it's not that bad really, but let's pull it down a little bit. On the volume, take that down a couple of dB. Fair enough, maybe it was poking up a little bit. Now for the rest of the features, I'm actually going to leave the vocals behind and switch over to the guitar arpeggio, just to show that it doesn't have to be vocals that we do VariAudio editing on. Let's open this. And I'm going to get it running. Set our locators. And zoom vertically, and then refix our locators. So here's a guitar line that we can process just like a vocal line. Now the first thing that you might be able to see is that my guitar must have been slightly badly tuned this day because these notes are a little bit like unnecessarily sharp. Now I did say in the previous episode you do have latitude and you could get away with this, it's absolutely fine. But I am going to pitch correct them, and there's a couple of ways that we can do it. The first way is to pick each segment up and drag it down. That's absolutely fine, that will work. But what I really want to do is use Cubase's internal quantized pitch mechanism. Now in order to do it, this is a little bit clunky. We need to set up a key command. If you search for quantize, I hate using Z on quantize, I'm an Englishman. Quantize pitch. That's the one. VariAudio quantize pitch. And you can see that I've got it set to Alt-Shift-Q. So now if I just select these three notes and Alt-Shift-Q, you can see that it's reset them all. I can Control-A, same thing. And now it's set the pitches of all of those segments. Bear in mind it's only going to quantize stuff that it can identify as pitched. So now let's hear what that sounds like. Okay. Whilst our ears are always the ultimate arbiter of what's gone on, I am perfectly happy to use my eyes to verify that nothing's been detuned in a way that, you know, is visually offensive. I'm also going to get rid of that delay. While we're doing processing on the guitar, we don't need a delay. I've got no idea why it's made all of my columns too narrow. Increase channel width and reduce channel width. For some reason, must have inadvertently made them a bit too narrow. Open my sends and just mute the delay on this track so that we can hear what we're doing while we're editing. Sometimes you might want to adjust all the notes at a single pitch. If I press the Shift key and double click a segment, it selects all the segments at that pitch, and now I can pick them up and move them wherever I want. And finally, once I'm happy with my edits, VariAudio has its own like internal bounce kind of feature. If you go into functions and select flatten real-time processing, then it asks you which algorithm you want to use. More often than not, you only get the real-time option. Just say OK. As soon as I execute that command, it actually takes us out of VariAudio mode. If I turn us back on again, because it's not even processed the VariAudio anymore, it's not figured out what its new segments are. So I just head back in, re-engage it, zoom back in. If I just make a very tiny edit to this VariAudio, I'm actually going to just pull it forward a tiny bit to make a new warp marker. But earlier I said we can always go in and edit either of these things, any of this stuff from either direction. If I now come out, you'll see that there's a little symbol here to say that this has been basically time stretched. If I undo that last operation, then the time stretch symbol disappears. One last thing to show you today. Might as well do it from the lower screen, why not? I'll just Shift G to zoom out a little bit. This arpeggio is perfectly usable as a keyboard line, but of course it's audio data. Well, we can ask Cubase to turn it into MIDI data. And the way that we do that is while we're in VariAudio mode, head back down into functions and say extract MIDI. We've now got this new dialog where we get to choose how do we want to interpret the data in this audio. And I pretty much always select just notes and no pitch bend data. I would rather deal with pitch bending myself, particularly in the case of guitar, where I play with a lot of vibrato quite a lot of the time, and it's usually quite slow sweeping vibrato. I don't want any of that to be inadvertently interpreted as pitch bend data. But if you do, then that's no problem, just interpret it there. And my volume mode, I like to have dynamic velocity, so it'll try to figure out how loud the various segments are and give us an appropriate volume. And then if we say OK, now down at the bottom of our project, it's actually interpreted my guitar line as MIDI data, and you can see that I've got all the various. Now some of these volumes are way too loud. You could arbitrarily just chop some of them off and just take a little bit of those peaks off. Or we can use the logical editor and set a velocity ceiling. So you can see the logic for that one. The property is an event and the velocity is bigger than 60, set to fixed value of 60. So 60 is a bit low, let's set that to 90. Select all of the notes in my event, and I have to do that because that's part of my algorithm. I'm only going to perform this operation on the selected events. Click apply and you'll see the high columns drop down, so that now we've got an absolute of 90. I'm going to create an instrument track and I'm going to select Prologue. It comes with all versions of Cubase. And I'll choose Analog Voice. And drag this MIDI track down onto it. Let's give that a quick listen, see what we've got so far. I want to raise the whole thing by an octave. I'm going to select all the notes, head into transpose, and I'm going to select 12 semitones, apply, just shoves everything up an octave. I'm in the event editor here in solo mode, so we're not hearing the rest of the song. I'll just come out of solo. not sure that vocal line's going to survive much longer, but it's been useful from a demonstration perspective. I think we'll leave it there for today and pick up from where we left off next time. Thanks very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like button if you did. I'll see you next time.